welcome back to The Essentials. And now we have a new name for the show as we have a new location. The show now will be called On the Shelf, where we will take the various films that we look upon and take them off the shelf. It's like the videotape versions because we're always dealing with old films and themes. And I am your host, Chase, the hijacker, and I'm joined once again by my good friend, Dan. Hey, Dan, what's up?
Hey, everybody, what's going on?
All right. And pretty much Dan has set the tone. And I got to tell you, this one is going to be a doozy because we are hitting that 80s hot sex comedies, the movies from our childhood. So it's going to get a little bit raunchy today. So send the kids out of the room, right? So what's our, what's our trifecta of the day, Dan?
Well, we're going to be checking out Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Last American Virgin, and Better Off Dead. And we could really sort of open this up by talking about like how I guess it's sort of like that era of the American sex comedy kind of opened up with Animal House, right?
Yep.
Animal House. And then, sort of
National Lampoon, pretty much.
National Lampoon's Animal House, and then went to Meatballs, movies like Meatballs, right?
Bill Murray.
And then, this sort of like these kind of movies sort of came about. Like I said, the peak was probably like 1980 to 85, somewhere in that era. You had other movies like Porky's.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like it's like the teen period of movies, right? Because in this 80s period, it's kind of like when we were growing up,
right,
as horny teenagers, and we needed the movies to compensate.
And Risky Business was sort of that movie, although it was serious. And then I think what happened is we'll talk about John Hughes maybe in another episode. Is that I think that when the John Hughes movies started to hit, this part of the teen genre died.
Yeah, because he really brought it back down to kids, didn't he? And made it like family friendly, but this period that we're talking about is when it wasn't family friendly, when you were in high school, you were looking for that mate, partner, however way they come. And, we were also under the alcohol law, like you had to be 21 to drink, and we were like, well, just barely hitting 18. So it's like, nah, I'm drinking already, bros. I'm sorry. But, and so these teen sex comedies or sex romps, which was prevalent in Britain, by the way, they were huge in Britain. But the Americans do it best. So Fast Times at Ridgemont High with Spicoli, man, Sean Penn. So start her off, Dan, and I'll hit to the real runch part.
Yeah. So that movie was based on a book that was written by Cameron Crowe.
Oh, Cameron Crowe. Oh,
yeah, the famous writer-director of movies like Jerry Maguire and Almost
Vanilla Sky.
Famous. Yeah, and and just like Almost Famous, which was based on his, times when he was like 15 years old hitting the road with a rock band. Here in Fast Times, it was based on his experience of he probably had already graduated high school a couple of years before, but he went actually back to high school for an entire year undercover as a reporter to write a book about it. And I think he went to a high school, I think in the San Diego area. And then the amazing thing about this film is how many young actors appeared in it either for the first time or the very early part of their career that went on to become really, really, really famous, right? So you obviously have Sean Penn and you have Jennifer Jason Leigh, but you also have Nicolas Cage and Eric Stoltz and Anthony Edwards and Forrest Whitaker. Judge Reinhold, So, I mean, it kind of reminds me in a way of like, well, a lot of ways, it's sort of as far as a teenage movie, a seminal of the times. It's sort of like the movie that sort of introduced to the world a lot of famous actors that were never seen before. So you can go back to Rebel Without a Cause because it introduced James Dean and Natalie Wood and Dennis Hopper, right? And Sal Mineo. But then if you can go back 10 years after this movie and you go to the Richard Linklater movie, Dazed and Confused, where like how many really famous people, famous before they were they're in there before they were famous. Was in that movie as well. Matthew McConaughey and Ben Affleck, et cetera, et cetera. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that kind of falls into that kind of category of like just, amazing casting, and it's like sort of this right combination, right film at the right time. And what's really kind of cool about when I think about not only this movie, but also the two subsequent movies we're going to talk about are the soundtracks.
I was hoping you were going to go there because Jackson Brown, I mean, you know what I mean, and stuff. It's amazing soundtrack.
Yeah, this is Jackson Brown, but also all that like the Go-Go's and Devo and Duran Duran, and you name whatever it was, that sort of 80s pop new wave music of that moment were in actually all these movies. And in fact, like, it's interesting to think about Fast Times at Ridgemont High. If Fast Times was made just 2 or 3 years, especially 3 years before, it'd be all disco, right? Or a mix of disco and maybe stuff like the Eagles or some stuff like that. That like it was like how much the culture changed that quickly over the course of 3 or 4 years.
Well, what year you said? 82, right?
82, yeah.
So we're talking about MTV started in
81.
81.
81,
So
yeah.
like the thing about it is that this movie, it had an MTV day glow feel to it, and it actually was the template for whenever we look back at the 80s, we look back at Fast Times, because you got a lot of in this color palette, like the pinks and the yellows and all of that kind of stuff, because it wasn't just set at a store, it was set at a mall.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So again, Mall of America, the 80s, so Fast Times was, I wouldn't say it was ahead of its time, but I would say it was starting the 80s trend.
Yeah. And I think that also you're right about that. I think that these malls, I don't know when these malls, the way they looked then, started coming out, but they started getting built in the mid-late 70s, but they kind of sort of changed and kind of formed, the culture of America in a way. I mean, later on, Kevin Smith did it with Mallrats, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. I did this. It's interesting that this is sort of the first kind of movie that, or main movie that kind of embraced like that mall culture that was sweeping America.
Yeah.
And also like, if you look at that this movie, when you look at it, is totally the 1980s. Like, there's no trace of the 1970s anywhere in this movie at all.
It was growing up. It was growing up fast,
Mm-hmm.
and like it was there. I mean, so let's hit the growing up fast bit. Because like this film burgeoned the loins, right?
Yeah,
I've
right.
already gave the warning. What it was, do you think that it was pretty much a warning to teenage sex and pregnancy
No, I
in
don't
the
think
way
people.
in the way they deliver it? Well, it should have been, because I mean, like, what it was is like too many people growing up too fast at this time period,
Mhm.
and like, so Ray Romano, right, the cool guy, the jughead of the crew,
Ray Romano, I think it's Romulus or something like that, not the comedian.
all right, Ray. Actually, like Romulus, but his father is an actor too. So like,
Yeah.
try to get. I think he's Rick and his father's Ray. Anyway,
Right.
so that character, the Johnny Ramone kind of guy, the ticket scalper and everything,
Hey, what's going on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yeah, the slick dude.
he had the nerdy friend Brad, who
Mhm.
worked at the movie theater as an usher, who didn't have the usher job. Right? So he likes Jennifer Jason Leigh, who also works at the
Mhm.
mall, but then she thinks the bad boy, which is what girls always did. They always went for the bad boy. And what I love the way he played that character was because he wasn't bad, he wasn't cool, and so getting to it, like, they get together and then they go out to the football field and they have sex,
Mhm.
and she's a virgin and everything, but he's pretending not to be a virgin. Maybe he is, who knows. They didn't really speculate too much on that, but he's what you would call the 1 minute brother or the
Mhm.
2 minute brother, and I love that. You know what I mean? I love the fact that he was in and out. He was like, oh God. Who doesn't understand that? I'm not trying to say I do. I'm
Well,
just saying.
let's also look at like when Fast Times and also Last American Virgin were made. So like, just say they were released in '82. So let's just assume
Hmm.
they were probably maybe made, shot in '81, give or take. Probably that's usually how you can look at these things. Maybe early
Yeah.
'82, but like, HIV and AIDS had just sort of that was the first year that those cases were starting to get reported. So nobody
Yeah.
really knew what
No.
that was, and it was affecting at that point a very small segment of the population. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
think I
so
think the first thing we really heard about it was Rock Hudson, really.
Rock Hudson on a mainstream level, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it started getting out there in '82 and '83, but
Yeah.
it was just primarily in a small groups at that time in the gay culture.
Hmm.
And so I think that these sex comedies thrived back then because it was a holdover from the '70s where there was a lot more openness about sex, right?
Hmm. Well,
And
yeah.
then I think that's partly why the John Hughes movies probably took over too, because all of a sudden it's like HIV was out there, so it kind of like the sex
Uh,
part of it got
yeah, but that's what I'm trying to
shut
say.
down.
That shadow's not over this movie, and that's why what was
That's what I'm
even
saying.
fun.
Yeah.
What's even funny about it is that before like she decides to do it, she has the best friend played by the luscious and lovely Phoebe Cates. And Phoebe is worldly. She's knowledgeable because she got a boyfriend in France. You know what I mean,
Mm,
and stuff like that. But she actually demonstrates to Jennifer how to give a
yeah.
self-flagellation kind of thing. And but she does it in public. So it's like she does it and it's funny, and then we cut to the other kids looking at it, and that just gave you the idea that everybody's curious, everybody wants to know, and stuff, and that was really cool. But what was really great about that scene is it wasn't like done in an overtly sexual way. It was done in an honest way, like like he's like, oh my god, he's embarrassed, so he leaves, and she's like, what, what's going on? And but then obviously because you do have sex, once, without a condom, she's pregnant, and so she has an older brother played by Judge Reinhold, who works as a pirate shack, whatever, and stuff like that. And like he's like the cool guy. And I love the way he did it because he looks very geeky, but he was like a football player, so people looked up to him. He was like an older statesman of the cast, and
mm,
and that was really great because they really casted young in this film and everything. So like, but I love it when he comes home and Jennifer's around the pool with Phoebe, and like she dives in the pool and she comes up in slow motion. Who doesn't remember this scene? The slow motion
mm,
rise of Phoebe Cates like Venus out of the clamshell, you know what I mean? And Judge is looking at her and everything. And then they cut to the fact that it's really his fantasy, right?
mm.
Like he's the older brother looking at his sister's friend and everything. But then he's like taking care of himself while doing it. Now
Right.
I've never seen that on film, really. I mean, at that time when that came out, and I was just like, oh my god, this movie, what's going on? What was your impression of it at the time? Because you're even younger than me.
Oh man. I mean, because I think, yeah, I think it was, I wasn't allowed to see that movie when it came out, right?
Oh, really? Did they
Well, because
actually stop you?
no, because I was 13 at the time, right? So I was probably still a little more in that kind of headspace of like going
Yeah,
wanting to see like science fiction movies and stuff like that.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So I think I never saw it in theaters, so I probably obviously I caught it on HBO. But yeah,
HBO, yes.
where else,
Yeah.
but like that was a scene like, once it hit HBO, like all the
Dan, leave the
friends,
room.
yeah. But all my friends, they all knew about that scene and they all
Oh,
talked about, oh, Phoebe, blah, 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 blah. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, you got to see the scene, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, so
You
yeah, I
know,
mean, she was like pretty amazing.
I'm just it was awesome. But then so let's get to the comedy. So we got Jess Spicoli played
Mm,
by Sean Penn,
yeah.
who has a family of brothers who are all in the business, aren't they? Chris Penn
Mm,
and the
Michael
others.
Penn.
Michael Penn, he's the writer, isn't he? He's the one who
He's
writes.
the songwriter, dude.
Well, what brother is the writer that does films?
He had a. Oh,
Did
I
the
don't remember
X-Men and
that
stuff
guy.
like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Really?
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Matthew Penn, I think, is the writer. Anyway,
Oh, okay.
but the whole point about it is that he's credited on a lot of films. But the whole thing is that he's really playing this stock character of a surfer dude and
Mm-hmm.
everything. And one of the classic scenes is when he orders a pizza.
Oh, there's a pizza.
Now, Ray, it wouldn't work without Ray Walston, would it? You know,
No, as Mr. Hand.
Mr. Hand. Isn't this our time, Mr. Hand? I love it. Oh man, I love it how Mr. Hand shows up at his house and everything. Oh man, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is classic film.
And every high school had a Mr. Hand, right?
Of course,
We all had that teacher or two that was just sort of like one or two screw looses.
I got to tell you, when I was in college, my English teacher actually stood in front of the room, had everybody else leave, and said to me, "Who pays for you to go to school?" You know, like kind of like a Mr. Hand. You know, I'm like, I don't understand what you mean, sir. Like, I just want to know who pays for you to go to school, because I hate to see people lose money.
I was in class one time, and like the teacher was like yammering on, and he was like by the window looking out the window while he was yammering on, and I was just sort of looking at him, and all of a sudden a desk went flying past the window. Like out, somebody threw it, and he just kept. I went like in my mouth. A desk just went flying, out past the window, and he just kept yammering on, like he didn't notice it. Yeah.
Now the other thing too is what Spicoli is like you mentioned his surfer dudes like Eric Stoltz, and were you saying Nicolas Cage was one of his buddies as well?
Well, he was one of the guys who originally was cast, Nicolas Cage and Eric Stoltz and Anthony Edwards. But I never remember, like, Anthony Edwards, I think, was a stoner guy too, right?
Yeah. Those were the stoner buzz and everything like that, and but I was also going to point out Forrest Whitaker.
Mm-hmm.
Forrest Whitaker was the football player. So, like, Spicoli had a black friend, who he smoked weed with, right? And everything like that. But his brother, who was the one who damaged his car and stuff? Well, did brother like damage the car? Yeah, his brother, because they were smoking. They crashed the car, right? And then they were like, my brother's gonna shit. He's gonna kill me, and then he's gonna shit. And then so Spicoli comes up with the idea, like, let's really mess up the car and blame it on a rival school. So they painted it and everything. So then we got the big football game trope, and like Forrest Whitaker is like flying through the air and all that other kind of stuff, and taking out the other team. But it's just classic because to see young Forrest Whitaker in this film.
Well, here's a question I was actually wanted to ask you. I'm glad this is a natural segue regarding Forrest Whitaker. Outside of Forrest Whitaker, when you look at like all these movies across the board, Animal House, Meatballs, movies, Porky's, boom, 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 boom. Outside of Forrest Whitaker, there are no black people.
Or the black people, are negative. So there are black people. So I mean, let's go to Chase's black people in these comedies. In Animal House, they go to jazz club, don't they? And that's where they're singing Shamalama Ding Dong and all that other kind of stuff in the toga, with the black band and everything. So there were black people in there. So yes, as long as they're in the band. I think there was only like one loser that was in there, Muhammad or something. But yeah, no black people.
But my point being is that throughout the 1970s, black culture exploded, right? Black exploitation,
yeah.
No, but black exploitation, but also like the music and on top of that with Good Times and Jefferson's on TV. You know what I mean?
Norman Lear,
and something happened like in the late 1970s where it's like the lid just got shut down for a while, right? Across the board, but especially like in these comedies, it seems like they were all geared towards like, okay, there wasn't never like, okay, in each movie there might be one main black character. You know what I mean? to
Not a
open it
main one,
up.
a secondary one, you
There
mean?
was always a secondary or a third. I mean, Forrest Whitaker probably was a thirdary character at best, right?
He was like a key extra.
But it's interesting like
A
that.
player, excuse me.
All these sort of teen comedies or sex comedies, like very very for white America, white
I mean,
audiences, even though all the music and everything like that, right?
mhm. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's crazy because like you said, there was like the black exploitation films and everything else like that, and I think you also had a lot of blue comedy, right, in the '70s.
Mm-hmm.
So you had Red Fox, you had Flip Wilson, you had Richard Pryor, and then when they started making movies, they were adult comedies, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
So um, where were the black youth culture? We didn't really have that representation. So then when you had like the Norman Lear comedies of like the families, like what you just said, All in the Family or Good Times or anything like that, they were always too good. They
Mm-hmm.
were a precursor to the Cosby Show, where it's like, let's have black kids, but they have to be really super good and special. And it's like, that's not me. So for me, if you're asking me and my friends, I loved watching these, shows like Little Rascals and Happy Days and all of that. And in Happy Days, you had the drummer guy. What was his name? I forgot. Sticks or whatever.
Right.
And in the first season, so they would always give us a nugget of a black character as a secondary character in the gang. But again, they were doing that for years. Like even with the East Side comedies and the Bowery Boys, you always had like kind of like the one black friend. Even in the comic strips, the Young Allies, you had
Mm-hmm.
Whitewash Jones. So the white audiences couldn't take the black gang or group of friends until Spike Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Until like, you got around to Do the Right Thing. Did you kind of like finally see that? And it was weird and great for us to actually see. But
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage people in the comments down below, if you're as old as me, I mean, am I wrong? Is Spike Lee the first time? Because I'm talking about like school days before Do the Right
You
Thing.
don't count,
Actually,
but you don't count Fat Albert.
yeah, Fat Albert was there. You're right about that. That's a
Mm-hmm.
cartoon, and it's the late '60s. So that was, yes, I had to count Fat Albert, but that was it, and it was a cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm talking about as far as characters that we just said in teen sex comedies, we didn't have like a black teen sex comedy in this period that we're
And I
looking
guess
at.
you really don't, because they're more music based. Like you probably don't really count, like, well, they weren't comedies either, like Crush Groove or you know
Yeah,
Breaking.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I don't count those, but you're making me think, and that's cool. The Wanderers had a black gang in the Wanderers, which was
Well, I
fantastic.
guess you have to go back to, like, what, I don't think have I seen it or haven't seen it in a long time. Coolie High. You could kind
Oh
of.
my God, yes, Cooley High. See, thank you. Yes, Cooley High definitely was our quintessential black teen comedy. I forgot about
And
that.
Car Wash sort of kind of fits into that mold a
That's not
little.
a teen comedy, but I mean, you were right about Cooley High. Cooley High, Mike by Michael Schultz.
But that's
Definitely.
like in '76 or so. That's like just like at sort of the height, or just right
Well,
after the height
it's
of
still,
black
yes,
exploitation.
yeah, it's still around the same period, and it's a precursor really to this sex comedy kind of stuff. So I mean, I'm still rigid to the fact that we didn't have a American teen sex comedy with black characters, but yeah, so there was black people
And I'm talking, but that's why
representation.
I brought up Cooley High, is because like that was in that part. That was that sort of peak of that era of, again, black
It was
exploitation, black,
it's a fan,
that
yeah,
crazy, and all the Sidney Poitier directed films and stuff like that that involve, all black cast, and
piece of
and
the
then
action,
a piece of the
yeah.
action, like as we've discussed before, by the late '70s, it just sort of fucking crashed and disappeared.
Well,
So
it
yeah.
wasn't a part of the trope, and when
Mm,
we were looking for the three to focus on, you're definitely right. It wasn't a part of the trope, no, and
yeah.
everything. So finishing off Fast Times.
Okay, so I'll talk really quickly. So Amy Heckerling,
Oh, I
it was
love
her
Amy
first.
Heckerling. Yeah.
It was the first film that she directed. She actually went to AFI, she actually went to NYU first, then went to AFI grad, and
Mm.
she made a short, and she actually was able to show it to the head of Universal Pictures, and he basically greenlit her to direct her first film based on the power of her short.
Wow.
I always tell people, make a really good short. It's your calling
I know,
card.
man. I know,
Your
and it's
calling
not that
card.
easy.
No, it's really tough. It's
So,
really. I think it's harder to make it.
was it a teen comedy, her short, or
I don't know, but I actually
okay?
think it's harder to make a really good short or
It
write a
is.
really good short than to do a feature. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, because you have
'Cause
to encapsulate it's the world building, so you have to sacrifice the world building to really build the world visually and then being able to have a one conflict scenario that can encapsulate that short. And
Absolutely.
you can't be worried too much about the sidelines as well,
That's why when we've talked about like Twilight Zone and Rod Serling before, he's such a genius because he, beyond almost
he
anybody
knew
else.
how to actually get right at the core of his story to actually give us one through line to focus on, and everything. So yes, pure genius.
Exactly. Let's see. They did a spin-off. They did a TV show for a season in '86. I don't remember this with
No,
with 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 Mr. Hand.
obviously with Mr. Hand, that's the only place to go. If we were to say where would you go, you would Mr. Hand. I mean, did he have another Spicoli type or?
I don't know, but there probably was just Spicoli that was cast,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
that thing. But and then as casting, I don't really have much of anything here except for Ali Sheedy actually auditioned for the Jennifer Jason Leigh
Wow,
role.
that'd be interesting and everything like
Yeah.
that. Because this is before War Games, isn't it?
Well, War Games I think came out the same year, but yeah, I
Hmm.
mean,
Yeah.
I think '82 War Games, right?
Yeah. John Badham's War Games, yeah, with
Yeah.
Matthew
So our
Broderick.
next film is Last American Virgin.
All right, so Last American Virgin. First of all, the title is clickbait, isn't it? I mean, you
Yeah.
know what I mean. That I can't even remember the actor's name. All I remember about that actor is that he went off to be in one of the Friday the 13th films. Um,
Yes, you are right about that. So Last American Version was written and directed by a guy named I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it, Boaz Davidson, and he
Boaz
was from
Davidson, not Boaz Yakin.
no, yeah, I know that guy too. No, Boaz Davidson, and so he was from Israel, and he had directed like 10 movies in Israel, and actually this movie is actually a remake of his own Israeli movie
Oh,
from
really?
from 1978, and that movie supposedly took place in the 1950s in Israel, but it's a remake.
What was it
So
called?
it's called Lemon Popsicle.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
and the success of the film led to a series of sequels, and it follows this group of three boys in the late 1950s in Tel Aviv.
Oh, wow. I mean, because I
And
think I've heard of the name actually,
so
but
it's the same writer and director, but I said same producers, Golem
Golden
and
Globus,
Globus,
yeah.
same guys, and the same DP.
Wow.
And the
So
interesting thing,
they really liked the concept, and then they decided to Americanize it.
they just started Americanized. Now, here's the interesting. So, and in regard to like this particular director, when I'm looking here, he kind of like didn't. I mean, he directed through the '90s, but most of them were like movies I've never heard of. And then he went back to Israel, did a bunch of Israeli films, and did some movie called American Cyborg, Seal Warrior. Um, and then like his last film as a director was like in the mid '90s, right?
Hmm.
But then he like there's a big chasm in his in his bio. Then he started producing,
Hmm.
and he ended up producing in 2006. His first big main film was The Wicker Man, the remake.
With
Then he
Nicolas
produced the
Cage.
remake of Rambo, and then he was one of the producers of the Expendables entire series.
Wow.
So he kind of came back and ended having his producer's career late in career, but there was this sort of 10-year chasm where he just disappeared. I'm sure he did stuff. I don't know what he actually did. Maybe he was in Israel making TV shows or something.
Hmm.
So
So,
he's had sort of an interesting career, but like I think as far as an American film, this really I think is his sort of main kind of only kind of well-known film as a director.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
it was different, wasn't it? Because like I mean, you had to kind of like fill me in a little bit on the pitch on this, but it was like it was a different type of sex comedy, wasn't it? You know,
Yeah.
because it had a tragic ending. You know, as most comedies do have a high ending, right? This had a
Mm,
tragic ending because, like, you know, the boy doesn't get the girl. You
mm,
know, it's not just that he doesn't get the girl, but he doesn't lose his virginity. You know, and the girl loses it to his best friend. You know what I mean?
mm.
And horrible. It was heartbreaking. And they had the song "Oh No" by Lionel Richie. It kills me, man. It kills me when I see that scene. You know, because it's kind of like I'm trying to help you. I'm the good guy. My life is like this. My whole college experience is like this. I was this guy. Um, Louis Monson or Morrison, whatever his name was. It's coming to me now. But you know, like she falls for his friend. He disses her because he doesn't know how to love, as most bad guys don't know how to
Mm,
love. And then she falls for him, you know, as he always wanted, because he was the best friend. This is what this movie is like. It's the precursor of the friend zone, right?
mm,
You know, this is the friend zone all the way, and he thinks he's gonna get with her,
mm.
right? And she's gonna get with him, and then that bad guy shows up, gives her the eye because he doesn't want her to have his mate, and he's like in that kitchen scene. Oh my god, it's like your mouth is agape because she looks at him. He looks at her. She doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know what to say. There's no big punch as we usually get in the end of a film. He just leaves. You putz. But that's me. I'm the putz. I'm sorry, Dan. I had a moment with this film.
That's okay. You're allowed.
Am I right though? This is what
Yeah.
happened. And it ends. He chooses the director. This guy director. He chooses to end on end credits of this guy driving away crying.
Mm.
And I can't tell you how many people were like, "You dumps," you know, all the name calling that they're saying to him, but really they're saying it because they're saying it to themselves.
Mm.
It was the only way to end this movie. In reality, you don't get the girl, man. If you're friend zoned. That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah. And
Ran over.
and I don't think you ever come out of it. You ever
No.
come out of the friend zone? No.
Hell no. What's that girl's name, Dan? What's her name?
Wait a minute, hold on. Let me. Let's see.
She's in the next movie, bro.
Oh, I thought you meant with me. The friend zone.
No. The
I got to wait a
actress.
minute. I got a book.
Come on, we all have a story. But what's that actress's name?
Her name is well. Like one more factoid about this film before we keep moving on. And also, let me also say that like there's scenes in this movie that like people would never probably dare put in today. Like that the scene where the three of them go to the older woman, right? And before the boyfriend show comes back home from the Navy or whatever the fucking.
Yeah.
And like
Well,
all three,
it's the
all,
quest, though, dude. What do you mean they would? It's the quest of trying to lose their virginity, isn't it?
right, but they wouldn't. I don't think today they would like have us. They would let that scene go on and on and on. You know what I mean? Like I think it's like the gratuitous kind of sex scenes, like with boys and stuff like that in these comedies. You know what I mean? They probably would like it would probably have been cut in half or cut down to a third,
Well,
just because.
they had a similar scene in Porky's. You know, when they all where they all go to the woman's house and everything like
That's
that.
true.
And
But
and Meat's got
meat.
the package.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And here's the other thing about this movie. You know, looking at the parents is that like not only in this movie but in Better Off Dead, which we're going to talk about in a sec with David Ogden Stiers or whatever,
Love it.
is that in all these movies, it's like the parents are like, man, it's not just a generation gap. It's like the parents are just sort of they're such cliches of just being like, on another planet. Like the parents have all been like, you know, we're middle aged, we're married, we're neutered, we don't get what you
Yeah.
guys are going through on any level.
Well,
And
there's a reason for that. I mean, you know, at that time period of the 80s, 70s and 80s, we had the holdovers from the 50s. So we had those TV shows, you know, like the Honeymooners and everything else, where Dick Van Dyke, where parents were sleeping in twin beds. You know, I
mm,
mean, I would defy you to tell me of any friends that you have that their parents slept in the same bed. You know, um, you know, and that was just the norm. So
about the
that
same room, you know.
yeah, well, yeah, but the thing about it is that that was the norm in that aspect, that the generation gap was real in the 70s. It was like, so
Mm,
you had the 50s parent with the 80s teenager, and they don't connect at all.
no,
So that's why I
no,
think
I
you
grew up
got
with
that
that.
trope.
I grew up with that kind of,
Yeah, but I think that's why
you
you
know.
have that trope in in these type of films.
Right. So the one last, see, the other interesting thing about this movie is that like nobody in this entire cast went on to much of like any notoriety.
No.
I mean, they might have been working. What's her name? The you know, that actress who's in Better Off Dead, which I'll come up with the name in a second. You know, she's been acting for years, and the guy who was the lead in Last American Virgin, he acted for a long time. But like, they never
Well,
had
also the boy, the mate, he was a recognizable actor too.
me what the guy who was the good-looking
Yeah,
guy.
the good-looking guy who got the girl.
Yeah. So here's the thing. So his biggest claim to fame, his sister is the one who created Pussycat Dolls.
All right. Okay.
You
Okay.
know. So yeah, and then, but but it's interesting, like whether it's the family or any of the like the character actors or whatever. It's like I don't recognize any of these people. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? It's pretty rare to see a movie that, not that Last American Virgin is that well known, but it's well known enough. But it's pretty rare to see a movie with so many people where nobody went on to like any real notoriety on any. You know what I mean?
No, I do get you, and it probably could. It could be that like that effect of like what you're saying about the director. You know, who the notoriety was coming over here to make an American film. I mean, you know, I mean,
Mm,
Golden Globus, you know, they really made a killing in the 80s with Cannon, you know, making all of the action films. You
mm.
know what I mean? But like this was their kind of like probably their step into the forest, wasn't it? You know?
Yeah, I
So
mean, and actually, the only person that I could, when I looked up, that kind of went on to going to a that was able to take their career pretty soon afterwards to a much different level was DP, a guy named Adam Greenberg. Because 2 years later, what did he shoot? The Terminator.
well, there we go for Golden Globus, right? And
I
so
think it was
so
Golden Globus, wasn't it?
yeah, because it's Cannon Group, man, and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they
yeah,
they
yeah.
they 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 were big behind Schwarzenegger films. I
So
mean,
he
yeah,
did he ended up, and then from that movie, he became like just gigantic DP. He did Ghost, I
mm,
think, and a whole bunch of other movies.
well, yeah,
But
well,
like, you just don't know, right?
no,
It's
you
that
guys
sort of a
don't
thing.
know. No,
Now,
exactly.
now, now, her name was Diane Franklin, and she
Yeah.
was in our last movie we're going to talk about, which is Better Off Dead,
Better Off Dead,
which
my
was
one of my
directed by,
favorite films.
yeah,
Savage
which was
Steve Holland, right?
Savage Steve Holland. He was 26 years old when he made this movie.
Yeah. I mean, like, and this was, to me, this was quintessential John Cusack. I mean, this was
Mm,
like John Cusack coming out of like 16 Candles, and it's like, hey, you could be a star. And I really think that like these two movies he did with Savage Steve, you know, because you said he also did One Crazy Summer,
mm,
you know, and everything like that. John Cusack, to me, he was my look. That was my god. That was my guy because he was such an
mm,
everyman. You know, he was such
mm.
a everyman Newtnick. You know,
Right.
whatever you want to call it. Um,
Like, he was a guy who was sort of like good enough in a casual way to get the girl, right?
mhm.
But also, like you said, like maybe new Nick, or I don't know what,
I mean, I
but
don't know.
offbeat
I'm
enough.
not trying to say he was like a geek, but he was, you know what I mean? He was
No,
like,
but he was offbeat and independent enough
good word. Yeah.
to not be part of, like, he's a guy in any of these movies who was not going to play the guy who was going to be part of the crowd, or going to be like
He
with the
was the
jocks or whatever.
quintessential outsider. Like for me, I was a big Archie fan, right? And to
Mhm.
me, Cusack was my Jughead. Do you know what I mean? And like, he was definitely an outsider of the pack. He was definitely somebody who had that magnetism that you will follow. So that means somebody you can watch in these films. And also, he's from now. I thought you would have came up with this. He's from a family dynasty. He's from. I mean, most of his relatives are actors.
They
You
are
know,
active, yeah. And I think he
especially
went up,
his sister Joan, who like who ended up.
been in a ton of stuff.
Hey, if you need like a girl just to be in the background, she'll do it. You can put a back brace on her, and I'm pretty sure she'll work it.
Right, 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 right.
Please,
And now,
please
and
help my sister.
she's had a whole career. She's had a whole career playing sort of like the kooky, wacky kind
No,
of
exactly, and I loved it. I
character.
loved it how hot, sexy she looked in Adam's Family Values, man. I mean, like I was like, oh my god, you know what I mean? Because I grew up with the dorky version of Joan Cusack, and I loved her because like especially like in Say Anything, where they actually played brother and sister for once, So no, the Cusacks, there's Ann Cusack, Cyril
And
Cusack.
he went to high school with Jeremy Piven.
Yes, yes. Now he also is the one that, because Jeremy was an extra. I don't know if his mom. I think his mom was a casting director and everything like that. So he did a lot of like bit parts.
He was in a lot
in
of he
Cusack
was in
films.
tons of John Cusack movies for
Yeah,
a
yeah,
while
yeah,
before
yeah.
he
But that was
before he became famous. And
yeah,
in fact, like Jeremy Piven would play these sort of like kind of like before he played Ari Gold for years, he sort of played these sort of like loser kind of characters.
yeah, yeah. He's good
You
at that.
know, you know, and
No,
then
he does it
Ari
well
Gold.
though.
He does it really well. And then Ari, he was always like like you said, he was the comic relief. He was always the best friend that couldn't get the date, or the guy who was like, late on the rent or some shit like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
He partied too much or drank too much. But he was always a guy who was sort of like, definitely, he was always the type B guy, not the type A Ari Gold guy. So
well,
everybody in the world who thinks that that's the kind of guy that Jeremy Piven is, the Ari Gold guy, because that's what they know him for. Like,
yeah.
no, go back and look at all these movies from the
Oh
80s
yeah,
and
he's got a
90s.
huge filmography. But also too, I just read that they're creating an Every Gold spin-off series for him and everything. So he's pitched
Mhm.
and is trying to get made the Ari Gold series, which I look forward to.
I could see that. I could see
Yeah,
that
well, no,
definitely.
he's bringing
But
his sidekick Lloyd
I
with
think
him
the
as
thing with
well.
John Cusack though, which kind of like I think as his career went on later on, it kind of disappointed. There was something, I don't know when, it was sometime in the last 5 or 10 years, he started making all these like really bad straight to video movies.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. John John has gotten like very political if you follow him on Instagram, and
Mm.
he doesn't do himself any favors. But I mean, to me, one of his last great films was Identity and stuff like
Mhm.
that, But he has done a lot of straight to video movies. I mean, so
It's like
he's
it's
out
almost
there.
like
He's working. I mean, he's probably still working today.
well, it's like what happens to a lot of these actors when they get to a certain point in their career, where it's like has happened with Nicolas Cage, and sometimes
Oh,
maybe it's maybe it's
sorry.
because it's financial too, with a lot of these guys, but like it's sort of like they kind of look, you have to sort of, as an actor, if you're not producing your own shit, then you're kind of waiting for people to call you, right?
Yeah.
So as you age, then you age out of the roles that you were known for play. But still, it's sometimes you look at people and they go like, huh, did this guy give up? Like,
Mm.
why is this guy like not at least trying to go make some kind of cool, fun indie films that will like, we could sort of see what he used to be like. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Instead of
Oh,
like,
but what he
you
used to
know,
be like is what we just said was like this kind of outsider, like Jugger type character, and it's like he's got to
but
grow
you
up
could still play
someday.
that as you get older, because people who are like that in real life, they don't really ever change. You know what I mean? They're always going to be that kind of guy.
I think
At
he's
one level
also
or
one
another.
of those actors who don't age. I mean, like John Cusack today looks like John Cusack yesterday. He's one of those guys,
Right.
that perennial like ageless kind of look kind of thing. You know, but yeah, so he plays. So anyway, so Better Off Dead.
Yeah, let's
So
talk about that.
yeah, why not?
Well, the thing
So
about with Savage Steve is that he had an animation background. He worked on a TV series in the 1980s, a game show called Pressure Luck that probably nobody except you and I would remember.
mhm.
and they had this sort of like thing where like when somebody like hit a wrong button, they had a whammy, and they had these like little characters that came out. I used to watch, Press Your Luck because I love the animation. I didn't know he was the guy who animated all those whammies.
Right. Yeah.
So he had this animation background. So obviously that's where you see all the animation in Better Off Dead. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out a movie except for, what was the movie? I don't think I've seen all of it. I've seen little pieces of it. What's the movie with, was it Don Knotts in the 60s? Where he had
The Incredible Mr. Limpet when he was a
yeah,
fish.
but was that half animation and half?
Yeah. When he was a fish, he was an animated fish. Yes.
Right, but I'm trying to think of like any films like
Who Framed Roger Rabbit with Bob
No,
Hoskins.
but that was afterwards. That was 88. But I'm trying to think of like movies that had sort of like some introduction of animation, except for Pink Panther, which just was the animated opening closings. It had a little bit of animation incorporated. I don't think there really are many of them out there.
No.
You're right, especially pre 1985 when this movie came out.
You're right. And this was kind of like weird because like you had the animation was played out as his imagination, and also was followed by great music. I love the soundtrack for this movie. But so basically he was a kid who felt like life's not worth living, so he would constantly try to commit suicide. That's what was Better Off Dead was like. Everybody be better off if I was dead and stuff and everything. And it's not until he meets the lovely Diane Franklin playing a French exchange student who doesn't speak English, does he actually finally find the love that he's looking for. He's got the guy who is his foil, played by Dan Schneider, as this kind of like nerdy, kind of like kid who's definitely on the autistic spectrum. But then he also has, the nemesis of the Paperboy, which is excellent. $2. He wouldn't give this kid $2.
I remember.
I love it when he had the Paperboy gang on bikes. He's just walking along, and then like bike after bike is appearing, $2, and they're chasing him. Which again was probably his imagination, but like it was great. And Curtis Armstrong as his best friend. And
let's talk a little about Curtis Armstrong. He's that guy who was kind of played that kind of gross friend because he, I guess, picked that role up in Booger, right?
Booger, yes.
But he was in Revenge of the Nerds, but he was also in Risky Business.
Yeah. So Revenge of the Nerds happened before this then.
Revenge of the Nerds was I think Revenge of the Nerds was 83 or 84.
Yeah. So I think this was the precursor to Booger because I think maybe
No. I'm sorry. You know what? Revenge of the Nerds was right before this, and then he was probably but Curtis Armstrong, and then he got cast. I totally forgot about it. I haven't seen in Moonlighting. Remember Moonlighting?
Yeah. I don't remember him in Moonlighting though.
Yeah, he was like in Moonlighting. I haven't seen Moonlighting since it was on air. I actually tried to find it. It's nowhere to be found.
Wow.
Considering what a successful series it was with Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd. But Curtis Armstrong was like that kind of go-to character in that generation for those roles. And I think when you look at the difference between say Better Off Dead and Last American Virgin is the casting. You know what I mean? Where, the casting is so much more, I don't want to say it's superior, but man, you really have a plethora of talent in this movie. Like David Ogden Stiers, who was Winchester Mash, who played the father. And again, it's back to the trope of the it's either the disapproving father. Well, it seems to be like in both these movies that the father's always disapproving, but the mother is just clueless. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's almost like the moms are portrayed as though they're on.
Well, it's like Edith Bunker, right? So it'd be the contrast of the Edith and Archie kind of scenario.
And I don't think you could get away with having. Look, you're always going to have like in any of these comedies, you're always going to have the disapproving parents, right? But I don't think you could portray women that way today of a mother
Oh
that's
no.
so
You can't do
so
that.
like just like whatever the husband says, and I'm like on Sominex,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, and all I care about is like the bake sale. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
So
No, it's a whole nother time.
it's a
But
whole nother time.
also, I
Yeah.
like the little brother who never had a line of dialogue, but you know, he was like a cartoon character in himself. You know, like yeah, he builds the rocket, or he has like the girls. He's like Hugh Hefner with the girls in his room and everything, and
Mm.
and so it was kind of like cool because the big brother is like, you know, I'm supposed to be teaching you stuff, and he never went to his little brother, help me out, man. You know what I
But
mean?
here, but here's the thing, and what's the movie that came out, I think, last year? Actually, I thought it was quite good, and it kind of broke the stereotype of all. It was directed by Olivia Wilde. She wrote and directed it.
Booksmart.
Booksmart.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
books. So here's the interesting thing: is like all these movies that we're talking about in general right now,
Mm-hmm.
because of the way movies are today. These movies would never get almost none of these movies would get released theatrically today. These movies all end up on Netflix,
Well, yeah, that's what. Yeah, yeah, you're
right?
right. They're definitely Netflix material. I mean, that's why it's cool in itself that it has its own genre. But they
And
definitely
I
wouldn't be of today's time, no.
and I think a lot of ways like Booksmart like seems to have definitely kind of took like this sort of the framework of this genre and flipped it, right? You know what I
Made it
mean?
about girls instead of boys and
Girls
stuff like that.
and girls that were particularly not might not be attractive to a lot of people in general,
Yeah, that's what I
right?
mean. Made it, yeah, and stuff.
And but it is sort of it definitely falls into that teenage sex comedy sort of genre in a way, but because that movie today was written directed by a woman and has that point of view, right, but also is probably put out more as though an indie film,
Hmm.
you know, or at least that genre that that fits the mold of today. But these films, you know, even Fast Times at Ridgemont High, I don't know if that would ever get made by a studio today or remade by a studio, you know, and get
Hmm.
released theatrically, just because it's, you know, it's not the kind of movies that like they don't make those kind of movies anymore. They don't make these like
No.
ground comedies, like, you know, because they don't want to make movies that like, oh, this movie costs 10 million, and if we make 30 or 40 million, we're happy, you know, because they want to make billions, you know.
Well, yeah.
And
I
it's kind of
mean,
a shame too,
so
because
I was just
I,
going.
no, I'm sorry to interrupt it, but it's a shame too because if you look at these three movies, right?
Mm.
It was Amy Heckerling's first movie. It was Savage Steve Holland's first movie. But on top of that, it was also Boaz Davidson's first American movie.
Yeah.
These movies sort of like allowed like young filmmakers to, you know, introduce themselves to the world.
Hmm.
So you don't
But
really have a lot of that.
they also did it differently. I mean, because like the imagination that you were alluding to about Savage Steve is like, it had a catch on a ride kind of feel. With John Cusack's character is
Mm-hmm.
like how he had this overactive imagination, which was kind of like done like on like TV shows of that time, even Dream On, with Brian Benben.
Oh, I remember that show. Sure, yeah.
Yeah, no, but it was just like it was kind of like these kids' imagination was a storyline in itself. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And they needed a guy with the artistic imagination of Savage Steve to make it. So each of these directors had their own individual ways of making the teen sex romp, and everything like that. So
Now,
that,
would you say that High Fidelity could almost be somewhat of a sequel to this as far
oh
as John
man,
Cusack?
a sequel? No, but it's
No, but
pure
like
gold.
almost like an evolution of like that character type.
Well, no, because he was so cynical as a character type. He was so cynical because it was a British story, wasn't it? So
Mm.
Nick Hornsby, I think, and he looked at the world differently, and he made statement on how he saw it, and he saw it through cynical eyes, not through rose-colored glasses.
Mm.
So John Cusack's character in Better Off Dead, I think, even though he was cynical upon himself, where he wanted to kill himself because he didn't
Mm.
think life was worth living. I don't think he looked through That's why he saw things in animation. I don't think he looked at it as cynically. So I wouldn't call them the same. But it's great. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because when you look at High Fidelity and you look at Say Anything, his Lloyd Dobler character in Say Anything was again a fantastic character who looked at life, and I was interested in what he had to say about it. Like he says, I don't want to make anything, I don't want to build anything, I don't want to process anything. And it was just like all he wanted to do was be with this girl. So all of these characters, as far as John Cusack, I think he had a narrow vision that you had to buy into it or not, and everything. So, I mean, I guess what I was going to say, and then that is that, because you brought up a point before, and which I thought was interesting, is like, because these comedies couldn't be made today, right? I don't know. I guess like if
they
you
could
were
be
to
made today.
try, no, I was going to ask you the question. If you would try, what would you try to do with it? Like what do you think you could do?
Well, I think that just in general today. I mean, I think any of these comedy. Well, you're probably going to end up having just a lot more diverse characters, right?
Yeah.
Well, I
It's
mean
such a dirty
that's
word
what.
when you say it. I know.
Well, no,
I
I mean
totally
it
agree
depends.
with you. It's just like I'm pretty much tired of diversity as a black man, as a writer, as a filmmaker,
Well,
I'm
no,
gonna
no,
call
no.
myself
When
an
I say
actor.
that, no, what I'm saying is that like they would just like if it's the three friends, you might just you might have those character types, but it might be just like it just could be like the white guy and the Asian guy and the black guy, but you never mention it's never mentioned. You know what I mean? Like what we've talked about like before with Sidney Poitier
Yeah,
when
no,
he was like
that's that. Yeah, but
where they just are. You know what I
well,
mean?
yeah, but the thing about it is, reason and I also frown because, like, have you seen Dope?
Dope.
Rick, yeah, Dope. That was a film that was made like about 3 years ago by Rick
Hmm.
Fumiyawa.
Hmm.
That was like a teen diverse comedy, made today. So
Hmm.
what did they have? They had the kid who is Spider-Man in the Spider-Verse, Shamar, whatever. They had the girl, the black girl, and Kelsey Clemens, and they had Tony Viriolo, the Asian kid who's from,
See, I think today, and I might be wrong because what do I know? I'm a 50-year-old dude, right? So, and also I don't have kids. You have a kid, so you know this differently. I think the way things are probably today is that if you're going to make a movie, right, and
mm,
seeing some of the like movies out, like I don't see a lot of coming of age movies these days just because it's not my thing.
coming of
You
age
know what I
movie,
mean?
yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'll look at the coming age movies from our era, but when I do see trailers for those coming of age movies, though, it seems that what they're about is about a whole bunch of different types of teenage kids, whether they're gay, straight, or girls or boys or whatever the fuck they are, right? As far as ethnicity or background, blah, 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 blah. They're all coming together because they're embracing some kind of subculture. So whether it's a movie about skater kids or it's a movie about kids who are into horror movies or they're all into hip hop and they want to start a hip hop band, like, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's where I think that's how you probably approach this stuff these days is that going into all these different subcultures, not just
Mm,
like, here's a movie and here's a bunch of three. Because back then, if you think about when we were growing up, there weren't that many subcultures, right? There was a lot more just mass culture. There was like black culture, there was white middle American culture,
mm,
and that was kind of it. You know what I mean? But now
yeah.
everything's so bifurcated,
Yeah.
where there's like 100 different subcultures out there.
Yeah.
There's like us, like there's, movie geek subculture and fanboy subculture. I mean, you could do a movie, but like a coming of age sex comedy about three comic book fans going to Comic-Con, trying to get laid, you know?
Yeah.
There's an
Well,
idea.
there's an idea. I mean, there's an idea.
But you see my point. So the thing is that these characters they're all together because they all have a common interest and love for something that's outside of their world that they're all into. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and you know, I like the, you know, like I just said, you're right. I think this kind of pitch thing is really interesting to, you know, usually end the show on, because like for me, you know, I mean, like I said about like Dope, there was that fantastic movie came out last year, Summer of '86, the horror film, where it's kind of like, you know, the whole biker kids in the Spielberg kind of realm.
Mhm.
That was really good. Top of the World, I think it was called, that kids film that was done on Netflix last year. So I mean, like I think, I mean, there's it's something to look into, I think, as far, because those aren't teen sex comedies, but I
Yeah.
think for someone to tackle trying to do a teen sex comedy but set it, of course, in the '80s, I think would be an interesting thing, because you know, you can't, unfortunately, I don't think you could do it today. Not just because it's the diversity, or you know, or anything like that. I think you just can't do it because it just doesn't make sense in today's world. You know, so it'd have to be something that you look back at. You know,
I
so
would agree with
I
that.
like what you just said about, like,
And
yeah,
also
well,
there would be
maybe it could
like,
be
you
like
know,
kids going to a Comic-Con or something like that. But
right, right. And also these three films all took place like in some place of, you know, suburbia, middle
well,
America,
you got
right?
to, because it's a trope, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, so it's like what happens, you know, but if you went back and you did like a teenage sex comedy in the 80s,
Hmm.
right? But then if you go, you know, if you did like inner city, wherever, you know, like how much
Yeah,
different would that be?
imagine Stranger Things 5 as a teen sex comedy. You know what I mean?
or
That work.
or if you did, or if you just reimagined Fast Times at Ridgemont High in the Bronx, right?
Kind of like Jackie Chan's Rumble in the Bronx.
Well, oh no, it's
Okay.
like if you took, wait a minute, you took like no, if you took like Fast Times at Ridgemont High and merged it with New Jack City, you know.
Wow. 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 Dan, you
That-
never cease to amaze me, man.
you
That's
know, well,
why
it's like,
we all need to play in your disco.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But this is that's why, like, when you know, it's like in what was it like? What was it? Like that movie, The Player, like when
Yeah,
they in the beginning where they're
yeah,
pitching and like Buck
yeah, yeah.
Henry's going like, it's The Graduate meets Ghost.
Yeah. No, but I love that one. Fast Times, Ridgemont High. What, New Jack City? Oh my
New
God.
Jack City.
Oh my
But it's
God.
got to be a comedy. Like you just said, you
Yeah,
know,
well, it would have to be. But
right?
anyway,
And nowadays, Mr. Hand would get played by Forrest Whitaker.
yeah, exactly. You know, anyway, so you know, because you know, it's time to put these films back on the shelf and everything like that. And you know, what us also being on YouTube, hopefully now, is that we can do these longer shows that we just had. So, and I mean, just before I close it, I had to mention that House Party, that was a black teen comedy in the late '80s and everything else like that.
About
So,
90 or so. But House
right,
Party,
well, yeah, well,
but House Party came in that sort of in the next wave of black filmmakers, right?
well, no, it did, but I mean, but that's what I'm just trying to say is, like, when I was trying to
But
say
you're
I
right.
couldn't
House
think
Party
of,
is sort
it
of
was it was just black kids in a teen comedy,
right.
and that's what I'm trying
Although
to
were
say. I
they in
had to mention.
college? Were they the first or
No,
second
no,
year?
no. They were at the end of high school. They weren't. I don't
Oh,
think
but
they
they
weren't in
shot it.
college.
Oh, but they shot that movie. We should save this for another time. But really quick, they did shoot that on a campus. I think a
Oh, right.
college campus, like in Alabama or something. We could talk about that another
Yeah,
time. We ever cover those
I
movies,
think you
right?
might be thinking about House Party 2, because I
Oh,
think
maybe
they made a
Electric
trilogy.
Boogaloo. No, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, and on that note, it's time to go. I'm the hijacker. That's my good man, Disco Dan. And you know, you've been watching On the Shelf here in our new YouTube channel and everything. And so please subscribe, please like, please add comments, because we love to hear from you when we put it onto Facebook or anything else. So for now, it's time to close the books that are on the shelf.